Hello there, and welcome to another gentle journey through the enchanting realm of history and legend. Tonight, we're going to discover together 100 fascinating things about medieval mysteries and legends, those captivating stories, enigmatic traditions, and remarkable achievements that emerged during Europe's Middle Ages, a time when the boundaries between history and myth, reality and romance were as fluid as morning mist over a castle moat. As you settle into comfort tonight, let your breathing slow and your mind drift back to an age of towering cathedrals and illuminated manuscripts, where knights rode forth on noble quests, where scholars preserved ancient wisdom in monastery libraries, and where everyday life was woven through with magic, mystery, and a profound sense of the sacred that touched everything from royal courts to humble village hearths. What makes the medieval period so particularly enchanting for peaceful contemplation is how it represented a unique fusion of Germanic warrior traditions, Christian spirituality, classical learning, and Celtic imagination that created a civilization unlike any other in human history, where practical concerns and mystical aspirations lived side by side in remarkable harmony. The legend of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, though rooted in possible historical figures from post-Roman Britain, grew into a timeless symbol of ideal kingship, chivalric virtue, and the eternal human quest for justice, honor, and spiritual perfection in an imperfect world. As you begin to relax tonight, imagine yourself walking through the halls of a great medieval castle, where troubadours sing of courtly love and heroic deeds, where monks carefully copy precious manuscripts by candlelight, and where the great questions of existence, the nature of God, the meaning of life, and humanity's place in creation are explored with both passionate faith and careful reason. The Holy Grail, whether understood as the cup used at the Last Supper or to catch Christ's blood during the crucifixion, became the ultimate symbol of spiritual seeking in medieval literature, representing the soul's journey toward divine union and the transformative power of faith, sacrifice, and pure intention. Tonight, we'll explore how medieval civilization created a remarkable synthesis of Roman organization, Germanic energy, Christian spirituality, and Celtic imagination that produced achievements in architecture, literature, philosophy, and art that continue to inspire wonder and reverence centuries later. The Gothic cathedrals that began rising in the 12th century represented not merely impressive architectural achievements, but profound theological statements in stone and glass, designed to lift the soul heavenward, while creating sacred spaces where earth and heaven seem to meet in soaring arches and jeweled light. Let yourself drift as we journey through medieval monasteries where scholars preserved classical learning while developing new forms of spirituality, through castle halls where the codes of chivalry sought to transform warriors into noble protectors, and through the pilgrimage routes where thousands sought healing, forgiveness, and spiritual renewal. As we explore these 100 gentle mysteries about medieval life and legend, you'll discover how this remarkable period laid foundations for much of what we consider essential to Western civilization: universities and hospitals, Gothic architecture and scholastic philosophy, romantic literature and scientific method. The medieval guild system created communities of craftsmen who developed their skills to extraordinary levels while maintaining ethical standards and mutual support, treating their work not merely as economic activity, but as spiritual service and artistic expression that honored both God and community. So relax completely now and let your imagination carry you to a time when every craft was considered sacred, when learning was pursued for the love of wisdom, and when the greatest heroes were those who combined courage with compassion, strength with humility, and earthly achievement with heavenly aspiration. As we embark on this gentle exploration of 100 things about medieval mysteries and legends, let's take a moment to understand the beautiful journey we'll share together tonight. The world we're about to enter spans roughly from 500 to 1500 CE, though medieval influences extended both earlier and later, creating a millennium of cultural development that bridged ancient wisdom and modern innovation. The medieval period began with the gradual transformation of the Roman Empire and the rise of Germanic kingdoms, creating new forms of political organization that combined Roman legal traditions, Germanic loyalty structures, and Christian moral frameworks in ways that would shape European civilization for centuries. Our peaceful journey will reveal how medieval society developed sophisticated approaches to education, governance, artistic expression, and spiritual life that balanced individual achievement with community responsibility, earthly concerns with heavenly aspirations, and practical wisdom with mystical understanding. The development of feudalism created a complex system of mutual obligations and protections that, while hierarchical, emphasized the moral responsibilities of those in power to care for those under their protection, establishing ideals of service and stewardship that would influence concepts of leadership for centuries. Tonight, we'll discover how medieval scholars working in monastery schools and emerging universities preserved and transmitted classical learning while developing new methods of philosophical inquiry that would lay foundations for both scientific method and systematic theology. The Arthurian romances, beginning with Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain in the 12th century, created literary frameworks for exploring ideals of kingship, knighthood, and spiritual quest that continue to influence how we understand heroism, leadership, and moral development. We'll explore together how medieval Christianity developed rich traditions of mystical experience, contemplative practice, and charitable service that created new models for understanding the relationship between individual spirituality and social responsibility. The legend of the Holy Grail evolved from simple references in early Arthurian literature into elaborate spiritual allegories that explored themes of sin and redemption, spiritual seeking, and divine grace, demonstrating how medieval culture transformed historical materials into profound religious and psychological insights. Our gentle investigation will reveal how medieval artisans and architects developed techniques and aesthetic principles that produced some of humanity's most beautiful and enduring artistic achievements, from illuminated manuscripts to Gothic cathedrals that continue to inspire awe and devotion. The rise of universities in the 12th and 13th centuries created new institutions dedicated to the systematic pursuit of knowledge, establishing academic traditions of scholarly debate, intellectual freedom, and educational achievement that would become foundations for modern higher education. We'll discover how medieval pilgrimage traditions created networks of hospitality, cultural exchange, and spiritual renewal that connected people across vast distances while fostering economic development and cross-cultural understanding throughout Europe and beyond. The development of vernacular literature in medieval Europe, from Dante's Divine Comedy to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, created new forms of artistic expression that made sophisticated cultural and spiritual content accessible to broader audiences, while celebrating the beauty and complexity of local languages and traditions. As we continue our exploration, you'll learn how medieval legal traditions developed concepts of individual rights, due process, and constitutional limitation of power that would eventually contribute to modern democratic institutions and human rights frameworks. The medieval synthesis of Aristotelian philosophy and Christian theology achieved most completely in the work of Thomas Aquinas, created intellectual frameworks that balanced rational inquiry with faith-based understanding, demonstrating how reason and revelation could work together in pursuit of truth. Tonight's journey will show how medieval economic innovations, including banking, accounting, and commercial law, laid foundations for modern economic systems, while maintaining ethical frameworks that emphasized fair dealing, just prices, and concern for community welfare. The medieval development of hospitals, charitable institutions, and social services created models for caring for the poor, sick, and vulnerable that reflected Christian ideals of service while establishing practical systems for addressing social needs. Let yourself relax as we explore how medieval achievements in agriculture, technology, and engineering created prosperity and stability that supported the cultural flowering we associate with the High Middle Ages. When cathedrals rose, universities flourished, and literary masterpieces were created. To understand the beautiful tapestry of medieval civilization, we need to drift gently back through time to discover how the collapse of Roman authority in Western Europe created space for new cultural syntheses that would combine Germanic traditions, Christian spirituality, and classical learning in unprecedented ways. The conversion of Germanic kingdoms to Christianity, beginning with Clovis of the Franks in 496 CE and culminating with the conversion of Scandinavia in the 11th and 12th centuries, created new forms of Christian culture that adapted to local traditions while maintaining connection to universal church teachings. The rise of monasticism, particularly through the rule of Saint Benedict, written around 530 CE, created communities dedicated to prayer, learning, and service that preserved classical texts, developed agricultural techniques, and provided education and charitable care throughout the medieval period. The Carolingian Renaissance, under Charlemagne and his successors in the 8th and 9th centuries, demonstrated medieval capacity for cultural renewal, creating new educational institutions, artistic styles, and political frameworks that would influence European development for centuries. The development of Romanesque architecture beginning in the 10th century created new forms of sacred space that combined Roman engineering techniques with Germanic decorative traditions and Christian symbolic programs, producing churches and monasteries that embodied theological understanding in stone. The First Crusade, launched in 1095, initiated centuries of military expeditions that, whatever their political and military outcomes, created unprecedented cultural exchanges between Christian Europe and the Islamic world, facilitating transmission of classical learning and new technologies. The rise of Gothic architecture, beginning in the 12th century, represented revolutionary innovations in engineering and aesthetics that enabled the construction of unprecedented large and luminous sacred spaces, creating cathedrals that seemed to embody divine light and heavenly aspiration. The development of scholastic method in the 12th and 13th centuries created systematic approaches to reconciling faith and reason that enabled medieval scholars to engage with classical philosophy while maintaining Christian commitments, producing new syntheses that would influence intellectual development for centuries. The emergence of vernacular literature beginning in the 11th century created new forms of cultural expression that celebrated local languages and traditions while addressing universal themes of love, adventure, spiritual quest, and moral development that resonated across cultural boundaries. The commercial revolution of the High Middle Ages, facilitated by innovations in banking, accounting, and transportation, created new forms of economic organization that enabled unprecedented prosperity while maintaining ethical frameworks based on Christian concepts of just price and fair dealing. The founding of universities, beginning with Bologna in 1088 and Paris around 1150, created new institutional forms dedicated to advanced learning that combined classical educational methods with medieval innovations, establishing academic traditions that continue to shape higher education today. The development of common law in England and canonical law throughout the Catholic Church created legal systems that balanced royal authority with individual rights and community standards, establishing precedents for constitutional government and due process protections. The rise of mendicant orders in the 13th century, particularly the Franciscans and Dominicans, created new models of religious life that combined contemplative practices with active service in towns and universities, bringing monastic spirituality into engagement with urban life. The translation movement that brought Greek and Arabic texts into Latin during the 12th and 13th centuries reintroduced Western Europe to classical philosophy and science, while providing access to Islamic and Jewish scholarship, creating intellectual foundations for later medieval and Renaissance achievements. The papal reforms of the 11th and 12th centuries, while creating conflicts between church and secular authority, also established principles of ecclesiastical independence and spiritual authority that would influence concepts of religious freedom and institutional autonomy for centuries. The agricultural innovations of the High Middle Ages, including the three-field system, heavy plow, and horse collar, increased productivity enough to support population growth and urban development while creating surplus that could fund artistic and intellectual achievements. The development of courtly culture in the 12th and 13th centuries created new ideals of refined behavior, artistic patronage, and romantic love that would influence European concepts of nobility, education, and cultural achievement for centuries to come. As medieval civilization reached its height in the 13th century, it had created remarkable syntheses of diverse cultural traditions that produced achievements in art, architecture, literature, philosophy, and social organization that would serve as foundations for subsequent European and global cultural development. As we drift deeper into our exploration of medieval culture, let's discover how these remarkable achievements continue to influence and enrich our modern world, offering insights into community building, artistic expression, spiritual seeking, and the integration of practical wisdom with transcendent aspiration. The contemporary fascination with medieval fantasy, literature, and films reflects enduring appeal of medieval ideals of heroism, honor, and spiritual quest that address modern longings for meaning, purpose, and moral clarity in an increasingly complex and secular world. Modern educational institutions continue to be shaped by medieval university traditions of scholarly debate, academic freedom, and intellectual community that created frameworks for pursuing knowledge through systematic inquiry and collaborative investigation. The Gothic revival movement of the 18th and 19th centuries brought medieval architectural principles into modern contexts, creating public buildings, churches, and institutions that embodied medieval aesthetic values while serving contemporary needs. Contemporary environmental movements often draw inspiration from medieval concepts of stewardship and responsible care for creation that understood human beings as guardians rather than masters of natural resources, offering alternatives to purely exploitative relationships with nature. Modern concepts of human rights and constitutional government have roots in medieval legal traditions that developed frameworks for limiting royal authority and protecting individual rights through legal processes that balance competing claims and community standards. The revival of interest in medieval music, both in scholarly reconstruction and contemporary composition, demonstrates enduring appeal of musical forms that integrated sophisticated technique with spiritual expression and community participation. Contemporary craft movements and artisanal production often look to medieval guild traditions for models of quality control, apprenticeship training, and community responsibility that offer alternatives to industrial mass production and corporate employment. Modern therapeutic approaches sometimes incorporate medieval insights about the integration of physical, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of healing that understood wellness as harmony between individual and cosmic order rather than merely absence of disease. The contemporary Catholic Church's emphasis on social teaching and preferential option for the poor draws heavily on medieval theological developments that established frameworks for understanding economic justice and social responsibility based on Christian principles. Modern hospice care and approaches to dying often incorporate medieval ars moriendi traditions that provided guidance for preparing for death and supporting dying persons through spiritual practices that honored both human dignity and divine mercy. The restoration of medieval monuments and manuscripts has developed sophisticated techniques for preserving cultural heritage that contribute to contemporary conservation efforts while maintaining connection to historical, artistic, and spiritual achievements. Contemporary retreat centers and spiritual communities often adapt medieval monastic traditions of contemplative practice, community life, and integration of work and prayer that offer alternatives to purely secular approaches to personal development. The modern study of medieval literature has revealed sophisticated approaches to allegory, symbolism, and narrative structure that continue to influence contemporary literary theory and creative writing while preserving cultural wisdom embedded in traditional stories. International law and diplomatic practices have roots in medieval developments of canonical law and treatise traditions that created frameworks for resolving conflicts between different jurisdictions and cultural systems through negotiation rather than force. Contemporary urban planning sometimes draws inspiration from medieval town design that integrated residential, commercial, religious, and civic functions within walkable communities that fostered social cohesion and economic cooperation. The modern understanding of university education as formative experience that develops not only professional competence, but also critical thinking and ethical reasoning reflects medieval educational ideals that understood learning as transformation of the whole person. Modern approaches to conflict resolution and restorative justice often incorporate medieval legal traditions of compensation and community involvement that emphasized healing relationships and restoring social harmony rather than purely punitive responses to wrongdoing. The contemporary interest in illuminated manuscripts and calligraphy reflects appreciation for medieval integration of text and visual art that understood writing and decoration as unified spiritual and aesthetic practices rather than merely functional activities. Contemporary pilgrimage practices, both religious and secular, often follow medieval routes and adapt medieval practices of reflective walking, hospitality, and cultural exchange that create opportunities for personal transformation and community building. The modern emphasis on local food production and sustainable agriculture sometimes draws on medieval farming practices and community organization that understood agricultural work as stewardship of creation rather than merely economic activity. Now let us drift into the heart of our exploration, discovering the rich details and captivating stories that made medieval culture so distinctive and that continue to fascinate anyone drawn to tales of chivalry, mystery, and the eternal human quest for meaning, beauty, and spiritual fulfillment. The legend of King Arthur's court at Camelot represented the medieval ideal of perfect governance, where a just king, surrounded by noble knights, created a society based on honor, courtesy, and service to the common good, offering a vision of political harmony that balanced royal authority with chivalric virtue. The quest for the Holy Grail became the ultimate symbol of spiritual seeking in medieval literature, representing the soul's journey toward divine union through trials that test courage, purity, and faith, with different knights embodying different aspects of human spiritual potential. Sir Galahad, the perfect knight who achieved the Grail quest, represented the medieval ideal of spiritual purity and divine grace, while Sir Lancelot's failure, despite his prowess, demonstrated that earthly excellence without spiritual perfection cannot achieve the highest spiritual attainments. The Round Table itself symbolized equality and fellowship among Arthur's knights, with no head or foot to mark superior rank, representing medieval aspirations for governance based on merit and mutual respect rather than arbitrary hierarchy or inherited privilege. The sword Excalibur, drawn from the stone, or given by the Lady of the Lake depending on the version, represented divine sanction for legitimate authority, teaching that true kingship comes from spiritual worthiness rather than mere force or political maneuvering. Medieval illuminated manuscripts required years to complete, with monks and lay artists collaborating to create books that were simultaneously functional texts and sacred art objects, using gold, precious pigments, and intricate decoration to honor the divine word contained within. The Book of Kells, created by Irish monks around 800 CE, demonstrates the medieval understanding of manuscript creation as spiritual practice, with every decorated letter and ornamental border serving as meditation on divine beauty and creative power. Medieval scriptoriums operated according to strict rules of silence and reverence, where copying texts was understood as form of prayer and service that preserved divine wisdom while creating beautiful objects worthy of their sacred content. The development of Gothic script in the 12th century created new forms of written beauty that balanced legibility with aesthetic appeal, demonstrating medieval commitment to making functional objects beautiful and beautiful objects functional. Medieval manuscripts often included marginalia and decorative elements that revealed the personalities and humor of their creators, showing how Even the most serious scholarly and religious work included space for playfulness and individual expression. Gothic cathedrals were designed as theological statements in stone, with every architectural element carrying symbolic meaning that taught Christian doctrine and spiritual truth to largely illiterate congregations through visual and spatial experience. The pointed arch, flying buttress, and ribbed vault that characterize Gothic architecture enabled the construction of unprecedented tall and luminous buildings that seemed to defy gravity while creating sacred spaces filled with colored light that symbolized divine presence. Medieval stained glass windows functioned as both artistic masterpieces and theological textbooks, telling biblical stories and saints' lives through images that educated viewers while creating environments of transcendent beauty that lifted hearts and minds toward heaven. The labyrinth patterns found in many Gothic cathedrals, most famously at Chartres, provided pilgrims with walking meditation paths that symbolized the spiritual journey through life's complexities toward divine union and eternal peace. Medieval cathedral building projects often took centuries to complete and involved entire communities in financing, planning, and construction, creating shared enterprises that demonstrated collective faith while providing employment and training for generations of craftsmen. The medieval code of chivalry attempted to transform warriors into Christian knights through ideals of courage, courtesy, generosity, and protection of the innocent, creating moral frameworks that elevated military service into spiritual vocation. Medieval tournaments began as military training exercises but evolved into elaborate social occasions that celebrated knightly virtues while providing opportunities for displaying skill, gaining honor, and conducting courtship within frameworks of regulated competition. The concept of courtly love that developed in medieval Romance literature created new ideals of refined emotion and artistic expression that influenced European concepts of romantic relationship, while providing vehicles for exploring themes of desire, devotion, and spiritual aspiration. Medieval chivalric romances, like the stories of Chrétien de Troyes, combined adventure narratives with psychological insight and spiritual allegory, creating sophisticated literary forms that entertained audiences while exploring profound questions about human nature and moral development. The legend of the Green Knight, told most completely in the 14th century poem Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, explores themes of honor, temptation, and moral growth through supernatural encounters that test knightly virtue and reveal the complexity of ethical decision-making. Medieval alchemy combined practical chemistry with spiritual philosophy, seeking to transform base metals into gold, while pursuing the parallel transformation of human consciousness from ignorance to enlightenment through understanding natural and divine principles. Alchemical texts used elaborate symbolic language and imagery that concealed their knowledge from the uninitiated, while providing initiates with guidance for both physical experiments and spiritual practices that aimed at achieving perfect wisdom and immortal life. The medieval understanding of the four elements, earth, air, fire, and water, provided frameworks for understanding both physical processes and psychological states, creating systems of knowledge that integrated scientific observation with philosophical and spiritual insight. Medieval physicians like Hildegard of Bingen developed holistic approaches to healing that combined herbal medicine with spiritual counseling and lifestyle guidance, understanding illness as imbalance that required restoration of harmony between body, mind, and soul. The medieval doctrine of signatures taught that plants and minerals bore signs indicating their medicinal properties, creating systematic approaches to natural healing that combined careful observation with understanding of cosmic correspondences and divine providence. Medieval pilgrimage routes like the Camino de Santiago created networks of hospitality and spiritual support that enabled people from all social classes to undertake transformative journeys while fostering cultural exchange and economic development. The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer reveals the diversity of medieval society through pilgrims representing different social classes and professions, showing how pilgrimage created temporary communities where social boundaries could be relaxed and human nature explored with humor and insight. Medieval mystery plays performed during religious festivals brought biblical stories to life through community theater that educated audiences while providing entertainment, demonstrating how medieval culture integrated learning with celebration and spiritual instruction with artistic pleasure. The medieval guild system created professional communities that maintained quality standards while providing mutual support, training apprentices, and contributing to community welfare through charitable activities and public service projects. Medieval guilds developed elaborate initiation rituals and symbolic traditions that treated craft knowledge as sacred wisdom requiring moral character and spiritual commitment in addition to technical skill and artistic ability. The medieval university curriculum of trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, music, provided comprehensive education that balanced practical skills with theoretical understanding, creating scholarly communities dedicated to pursuing truth through systematic inquiry. Medieval scholars like Thomas Aquinas developed sophisticated methods for reconciling classical philosophy with Christian theology, creating intellectual syntheses that demonstrated how reason and revelation could work together in pursuit of ultimate truth. The medieval development of polyphonic music created new forms of sacred and secular art that expressed theological and emotional complexity through interweaving melodic lines that demonstrated harmony arising from diversity and cooperation. Medieval composers like Hildegard of Bingen created musical works that combined sophisticated artistic technique with mystical inspiration, producing compositions that served both liturgical functions and personal spiritual expression through sound that seemed to embody divine beauty. As we drift toward the peaceful conclusion of our journey through medieval mysteries and legends, let's discover how all these fascinating elements weave together into a unified understanding that offers guidance for creating communities, pursuing knowledge, and living with purpose in our contemporary world. Medieval civilization demonstrates that human societies can achieve remarkable cultural heights through integration of spiritual aspiration, intellectual inquiry, artistic expression, and social responsibility, creating civilizations that honor both individual achievement and collective welfare. The medieval synthesis of classical learning, Christian spirituality, and Germanic traditions shows how different cultural streams can enrich rather than diminish each other when approached with respect, openness, and commitment to finding deeper truth beneath surface differences. The medieval development of universities, hospitals, and charitable institutions reveals how communities can create lasting institutions that serve human flourishing while embodying values of learning, healing, and service that transcend immediate practical needs. The medieval understanding of craft as sacred calling demonstrates how ordinary work can become spiritual practice when performed with skill, integrity, and dedication to serving something greater than immediate self-interest or economic gain. The Arthurian ideal of the Round Table offers models for leadership and governance that balance authority with accountability, individual excellence with mutual support, and practical effectiveness with moral integrity. The medieval tradition of pilgrimage reveals how journeys undertaken with proper intention and openness can become transformative experiences that provide healing, insight, and renewed sense of purpose and connection to larger meaning. The Gothic cathedral achievement demonstrates how communities can create works of extraordinary beauty and spiritual power through collective commitment, skilled craftsmanship, and shared vision that extends beyond individual lifetimes. The medieval integration of learning and spirituality shows how intellectual inquiry and contemplative practice can support rather than conflict with each other, creating approaches to knowledge that honor both rational understanding and intuitive wisdom. The chivalric tradition, despite its historical limitations, created ideals of service, protection, and moral courage that continue to inspire anyone seeking to use strength and privilege for benefiting others rather than merely advancing personal interests. The medieval understanding of community as extending from immediate family through guild and village to universal church created frameworks for belonging and responsibility that balanced individual rights with collective obligations. The preservation of classical learning through medieval monasteries demonstrates how communities dedicated to contemplative values can serve broader cultural needs while maintaining their spiritual focus and distinctive way of life. The medieval development of legal traditions that limited arbitrary authority while protecting individual rights created foundations for constitutional government and human rights that continue to evolve in contemporary democratic societies. The medieval artistic achievement in manuscript illumination, cathedral building, and liturgical music shows how aesthetic expression can serve spiritual purposes while creating works of lasting beauty that inspire and uplift across centuries. The medieval understanding of education as formation of character as well as transmission of knowledge offers alternatives to purely technical or professional training that address whole human development, including ethical and spiritual dimensions. the medieval guild tradition of combining technical excellence with ethical standards and community responsibility provides models for professional life that balance individual advancement with service to larger good and mutual support among colleagues. As we reach the gentle end of our journey through 100 things about medieval mysteries and legends, let yourself settle into the peaceful understanding that we've explored together one of history's most fascinating periods of human cultural achievement and spiritual aspiration. The wisdom we've discovered tonight reminds us that medieval people, despite lacking modern technology and scientific knowledge, achieved remarkable insights into human nature, community organization, and the integration of practical life with spiritual meaning. The Arthurian quest for the Holy Grail continues to symbolize the eternal human search for ultimate meaning and spiritual fulfillment that gives purpose to all lesser achievements and makes even failure noble when undertaken with pure intention. What makes medieval culture so enduringly appealing is how it created frameworks for understanding life as both practical challenge and spiritual adventure, where everyday activities could become opportunities for growth in virtue, wisdom, and service to others. The Gothic cathedral represents humanity's capacity to create works of extraordinary beauty and spiritual power through combining individual skill with collective vision, demonstrating how communities can achieve far more than individuals working alone. The medieval understanding that true nobility comes from character rather than birth offers hope that anyone can achieve excellence through dedication to virtue, service, and the pursuit of wisdom regardless of social circumstances or material limitations. The chivalric ideal that strength should serve justice and protect the vulnerable provides timeless guidance for anyone who possesses power, privilege, or special abilities about how to use these gifts for benefiting rather than exploiting others. Let yourself rest in the knowledge that medieval achievements in art, architecture, literature, and spiritual practice continue to offer inspiration and guidance for anyone seeking to live with greater purpose, beauty, and connection to transcendent meaning. The medieval integration of work and prayer, learning and service, individual excellence, and community welfare demonstrates how different aspects of human life can support rather than compete with each other when organized around shared values and common purposes. As you drift toward sleep tonight, imagine yourself blessed by the medieval understanding that every person has unique gifts and calling that can contribute to the beauty and goodness of the world when developed through dedicated practice and offered in service to others. The Round Table reminds us that true fellowship creates strength through mutual respect and shared commitment to noble purposes that honor each person's contributions while working toward goals that benefit everyone. Rest well tonight, knowing that the courage and idealism that draws us to medieval legends reflects the same eternal human aspiration toward heroism, honor, and spiritual achievement that motivated the best of medieval culture. Sweet dreams, and may the wisdom of medieval teachers, the courage of Arthurian knights, and the beauty of Gothic cathedrals inspire you with confidence that human beings can create remarkable good when guided by noble ideals and sustained by communities of mutual support. Good night, and may you wake refreshed with deeper appreciation for the integration of practical skill with spiritual aspiration, individual achievement with community service, and earthly beauty with heavenly purpose that medieval culture exemplified at its finest.